I always get the same thing. A black coffee, no sugar, no cream. It's not a statement, it's just the one I can remember without thinking. She remembers it too. I'm not sure how I know exactly, but by the time I reach the counter, she's already sliding the cup toward me. The sleeve is warm against my fingers, and for a second, I hesitate, watching her hands. Long fingers, knuckles faintly red from the morning cold. She doesn't look up, not really, but her eyes flick toward me, just for a second, and I catch it. I pull the chair out slowly, careful not to clatter it. She hums something low, maybe a song, maybe just a note she always hums when she's alone with the espresso machine. The hum lingers in the air, and I realize I've been watching her every day for a week. I tell myself it's because she's efficient, or because she runs the place like she owns it, but it's not, it's something else, something quiet I don't name. She asks if I want a muffin. I shake my head, but she sets one down anyway, just a bite-sized blueberry, almost ceremoniously. You'll change your mind, she says. Her voice is steady but soft, like she's delivering news, not asking a question. I nod. She smiles faintly, not enough to be a smile, but enough to make me wonder if I imagined it. I sit across from her, because there's no table in between that really matters. I stir my coffee slowly, tracing the rim with my thumb, watching the tiny rings the liquid leaves behind. She wipes down the counter, a rag moving back and forth, and for some reason, the motion fascinates me. I notice the little crease of her wrist, the way she presses too hard at the edge, then softens almost instinctively. I check my phone, though I know it's useless. Unsent texts. Drafted messages that I'll never send. Nothing urgent, nothing real. Just a habit of reaching for something that doesn't answer back. She glances at me again and I feel my chest tighten. Not with anything dramatic. Just a quiet, inward pull like a string tugging at the hem of a coat I've never worn. Your usual, right? She asks, finally. There's a pause before I answer. I feel my throat dry. Yeah, thanks. I don't look up, my fingers tap against the cup. Not nervous, exactly. Just aware, like I shouldn't take more than this, shouldn't stay longer, shouldn't notice too much. She hums again, and the low vibration fills the space between us. I flick my eyes toward her hands, almost without thinking. They're steady now, resting on the counter, fingers splayed like she's balancing something fragile. I imagine reaching out, just a little, but I don't. I take a slow sip. Coffee bitter, warm, familiar. We don't talk much after that. Small smiles, nods, occasional glances. The silence isn't empty. It's deliberate, like we're both testing the weight of it. I notice the way she leans slightly when she laughs at a customer's joke, or how she tilts her head when she doesn't understand something. Little things I catalog quietly in my head. The bell over the door jingles. A new customer. She looks up, and I know the moment is over, or maybe it's only paused. I stand preparing to leave, and she slides the cup back into place. I don't reach for it. As I step outside, my phone buzzes in my pocket. A message I wasn't expecting. I kept your cup. Thought you might want it back. I stop walking, fingers tight around the strap of my bag. The street is empty, overcast, ordinary. But something about the message makes the air feel different. And I realize I might be waiting for her, without knowing why. The apartment smelled faintly of laundry detergent and old wood. I'd come to drop off the rent, like I did every month. But she was already in the kitchen, crouched by the sink, scrubbing something I didn't recognize. She didn't look up when I stepped inside. Morning, I said, voice quieter than I intended. Coffee. She offered without turning. I nodded, leaning against the doorframe. She poured 2 mugs and handed one over. My fingers brushed hers brief. Nothing more. But the warmth lingered longer than it should have. We sat on the small counter stools, our knees almost touching, not speaking for a few beats. I watched her fingers wrap around the mug. They trembled slightly. I wanted to ask why, but didn't. I used to work in a bookstore, she said suddenly, like the thought had been waiting to escape. She didn't look at me. A long time ago. Before everything changed. I tilted my head. Everything. Her eyes flicked up briefly. Divorce, kids grown, life rearranged itself. I guess. She sipped the tea and let the silence stretch. I imagined her in that old bookstore sorting shelves, bending to pick up fallen books. Quiet mornings smelling of paper and dust. I pictured her younger, softer, laughing at a customer's joke. A pang of something I couldn't name, something tender, hit me. I never stayed in one place very long, she added. Not after certain things. Her gaze met mine for a fraction of a second. Then she looked away. I wanted to ask what she meant, I didn't. Instead, I stirred my tea, watching the motion circle the mug. The quiet made my chest ache in a way that was hard to label. We started doing small, practical things together. She asked me to help hang a shelf, just moving brackets, tightening screws. My hands hovered near hers at times, brushing accidentally. Each touch felt amplified, like a silent question neither of us dared to ask aloud. Her voice would break sometimes, a little too soft, when she described something ordinary. A client's complaint, a stray cat she fed. I wanted to comfort her, but even leaning closer felt like crossing an invisible line. Age, experience, caution. They all lingered in the space between us. At one point, she dropped a screw. I bent down to pick it up. Our hands met again, lingering slightly longer than needed. I felt her palm press against mine, faintly, almost as if she were checking the warmth. I froze. She didn't withdraw immediately. She just let her eyes soften, and for that small, suspended moment, the world narrowed to the two of us, and the shelf, and the quiet hum of the apartment. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She cleared her throat and stepped back, finally, adjusting her cardigan. The spell broke. The shelf was hung, the air returned to its ordinary weight. But I walked out that day carrying a quiet something that wouldn't leave me. And for the first time, I wondered whether some lines weren't meant to be crossed, or whether it was just too late to care. The rain tapped softly against the window pane, rhythm slow, uneven, like the way my thoughts kept skipping when she was around. I had come by to fix a leaky faucet in her kitchen, nothing urgent, just a drip. But somehow the mundane felt heavy today. She was standing by the sink when I arrived, towel in hand. You don't have to. She started, but I waved her off. Hands shoved into my pockets. I felt the awkward warmth creeping up my neck. We worked in silence, the occasional clink of metal the only sound beyond the rain. I held the wrench a little too long, hesitated over the faucet. She reached for a rag and our fingers brushed again. I wanted to pull away, I didn't. Careful, she murmured, her voice soft, almost a whisper. The word lingered, caught between caution and something else I couldn't name. I glanced up. She was watching me, not intently, not pointedly, but enough that I felt exposed. Her eyes flicked to my hands, then back to the sink, and I realized I'd been imagining what it would feel like if I leaned closer, just for a second. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. She stiffened, pulled slightly back. I froze. The neighbor's door opened. A man's voice called something indistinct. We both looked toward the sound, and when it passed, she exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding it in. I wanted to ask if she was okay. Didn't. Instead, I wiped my hands on a rag, trying not to notice her watching me again. The space between us felt thick. My chest was tight, my stomach hollow. Almost done, I said, voice trailing. She nodded, eyes downcast. I caught her glance on mine. Then she looked away fast, brushing hair from her shoulder. Tiny movements, too deliberate. I wanted to say something, anything, to close the gap. Instead, I bent slightly to tighten the last screw, and she leaned just a fraction closer to see. Our shoulders brushed. My breath hitched. She didn't step back, neither did I. For a moment, everything slowed. The rain, the faucet, the distant voices, they all faded into the edges of my mind. I wanted to reach up, touch her hair, her cheek, but the thought froze halfway. I started. My words failed me. She swallowed, eyes meeting mine briefly. Maybe next time, she said, voice light, almost like a joke. But it wasn't a joke. Something lingered behind it. I straightened, heart thumping, and she moved to hand me a towel. Our fingers brushed again. A brush too long to be accidental, too soft to be casual. My mind raced, imagining the impossible, leaning in, saying the things we both couldn't. Then the faucet ran smooth, the wrench cold in my hands, the moment evaporating like mist. She cleared her throat, and the spell broke. I wanted to stay, wanted to ask her to stop pretending this was ordinary, but I said nothing. I left with wet hair and racing thoughts. The image of her leaning just slightly toward me burned behind my eyes. The rain followed me outside, cold and steady, and I realized how much I'd been holding back. Almost too close, almost too much, and yet not close enough. The evening air was damp, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and the faint hint of flowers from someone's balcony. We were walking slowly, side by side, the city quiet except for distant traffic. I kept my hands in my pockets, but I felt the weight of her presence next to me like gravity. She laughed softly at something a passerby said, just the corner of her mouth, and I felt it tighten something in my chest. I didn't realize it until a pang of jealousy hit. A tiny, irrational jab, because I wanted her attention, only mine, even if I knew it was unreasonable. You never talk about yourself much, I said, voice lower than I intended. She glanced at me, eyebrows slightly raised. Not much to say, she replied, but her voice trembled a little, like she was testing the statement, letting it hang. I stopped walking without meaning to, and she almost bumped into me. Our shoulders brushed. I wanted to take a step closer but froze. Instead, I leaned against the railing of a small bridge, arms crossed, trying to look casual. I used to worry too much, I said finally. About things. About people noticing too much. My hands twitched in my pockets. About messing things up. She stayed quiet, just watching me. I noticed the faint tilt of her head, the way her eyes softened but didn't fully let me in. I swallowed. I sometimes wonder if you notice me the way I notice you. The words were barely audible. I wanted to take them back immediately, cover them up with a joke or shrug, but something in her gaze held me. Her hand brushed against mine as she adjusted the strap of her bag, a gesture so small it could have been accidental. My pulse jumped. I imagined letting my hand linger, imagining her letting it stay, imagining the world narrowing to the space between us. She looked down at the railing, then up at me. I don't want to mess things up, she said softly. No one else around, no expectation, no demand. Just quiet honesty. And the air felt charged in its own subtle way. I wanted to tell her everything I felt. Everything been pretending didn't exist. Wanting her near. Wanting her attention. Wanting the small sparks of contact that made my chest ache. I wanted to confess, to risk it all in a few shaky sentences. Instead, I let a pause stretch between us, heavy, almost unbearable. She shifted, fingers fidgeting with the zipper of her jacket. I watched, heart hammering, noticing how the small movements became enormous in the quiet. The streetlights reflected on the wet pavement, the city hushed around us. I imagined saying it all, the words spilling out, and wondered if she would step closer, if she would pull away, if it would ruin everything or begin something irreversible. But I didn't speak, not yet. Instead, I asked a question I didn't voice aloud. Do you feel it too? Or am I alone in this? She didn't answer. She just kept walking, her steps slow, deliberate, her presence like a weight I couldn't measure but couldn't ignore. And for the first time I realized how much I wanted to cross the line, and how terrified I was of what would happen if I did. I stopped going by the apartment that week. Not deliberately. Not like I planned to disappear, but the urge to see her became tangled with a weight I couldn't name. The faucet didn't need fixing, and the drip of the coffee machine didn't call my name, but still I missed the small, unremarkable rhythms of her presence. When I finally passed the building again, I noticed her in the window, sleeves rolled up, hair pulled back, but something was off. She didn't glance down, didn't hum, just moved with a kind of mechanical precision, wiping counters, stacking dishes. She hadn't seen me. Or she was pretending she hadn't. I stood there longer than I should have, hands stuffed in my pockets, feeling both invisible and painfully aware. The familiar pull in my chest, the one I'd learned to call longing, twisted. I realized I didn't know where I stood anymore. Did she want me to notice? Or did she want to be left alone? The next day, I tried to text. Something simple, coffee later. I stared at the unsent message for 10 minutes, thumb hovering over the send button. I imagined her reading it, imagining my voice, imagining the small, faint smile she might offer. And then I imagined her annoyance, her disinterest, her polite refusal. The images collided, and I deleted the message instead. Later, I saw her at the corner store picking out apples. She smiled, but it was careful, reserved, like she was measuring her steps, her tone, her look. She had a child with her, a boy I hadn't known about. He tugged at her sleeve, asked her something, and she answered gently, warm, completely absorbed. I froze, like a figure paused in a photograph, and she didn't notice me at all. The world felt heavier after that. Walking home, I replayed the small gestures I'd misread, or maybe not misread. Her hand brushing mine, the way she let our shoulders almost touch. And now, framed by the presence of someone else, the moments seemed like echoes from another life I'd never inhabit. I tried showing up the next morning, coffee in hand. She wasn't there. A note: sorry, busy today. Her handwriting neat, deliberate, no explanation, no apology for the absence. Just a line that somehow said everything and nothing. I left the cup on the counter anyway. She didn't come by to collect it. It sat there, untouched, like a placeholder for something I couldn't name. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. I kept walking past the building for the next few days, hoping to see her in that narrow window of kitchen light. Hoping she'd hum. Hoping she'd glance down. Hoping she'd look at me like she had before. But every time, she didn't. The coffee cup remained. The faucet dripped. And I realized the hardest part wasn't rejection. It was the uncertainty, the waiting, the slow ache of not knowing whether this was a pause or an ending. And so I left the street empty, the air unchanged, my chest quietly heavy, carrying the unsent words and the unclaimed cup like small, sharp stones. The kitchen smelled faintly of rain and lemon cleaner. I had come over without thinking. Just to see her, or maybe just to be in the apartment where her presence lingered, even when she wasn't speaking. She was sitting at the small table, hands wrapped around a mug, eyes fixed on the surface. I cleared my throat, unsure whether to sit or stand, and she looked up, not startled, not inviting, just noticing me. That was enough. I wasn't sure if I should come, I said, voice low, tripping over itself. She tilted her head, waiting. I realized I had 1,000 words stored up, each one louder in my mind than it sounded aloud. You don't have to explain, she said finally. Quiet, deliberate. Her eyes softened a fraction, the way they did sometimes when she trusted someone enough to let a crack show. I sat. Far enough to respect space, close enough that I felt it. The mug warmed my hands, but it wasn't the warmth I noticed. It was her, just sitting there, presence steady, watching. I didn't stop thinking about the other day. I said. The pause. My words trailed, hesitant. I kept wondering if we. I stopped. She didn't interrupt. She just let her hands rest on the table, one finger tapping lightly against the rim of her mug. I know, she said after a long silence. I pulled away. I needed to think. Didn't want to complicate things. Her voice wasn't defensive, just honest, quiet, almost fragile, and in that honesty, I realized I had a choice to step closer, risk everything, or retreat, safe but hollow. I leaned slightly, just enough to close the space between us without breaking it. I don't know what happens next, I admitted, but I'd rather be honest. Even if it's risky. Her eyes met mine fully now, no hesitation, just observation. She exhaled slowly, letting the weight of unspoken words settle between us. Okay? She said softly. Just that one word. I smiled faintly. A small gesture, but it carried everything: relief, acknowledgement, and a quiet agreement that we'd try, even if the outcome was uncertain. Her hand brushed against mine as she moved her mug. Not a grab, not a gesture of ownership, just contact, intentional, human, enough. We sat in silence after that, not awkward, not tense, comfortable in the presence of someone who finally saw you without needing explanation. I could feel the shift, the weight lifting slightly, the air less charged, less paused. I didn't need her to say anything else. I didn't need the perfect declaration or a dramatic promise. Just this, her near, her acknowledgement, the subtle brush of fingers across the table. That was enough. And maybe, for the first time, I realized that honesty didn't have to be loud. It could be this small, this quiet, this human. The rain outside slowed. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon and warmth, and I let myself breathe. Weeks passed. The apartment smelled less like lemon cleaner and more like lived-in life. Coffee brewing at 8:47 a.m., tea cooling on the counter, the faint scent of rain lingering in the hall. I got used to small routines again, but now they included her, in subtle ways I barely noticed at first. I brought the black coffee every morning, the same one I always got. She'd hum low behind the counter, not noticing me. Or maybe noticing, just enough. The warmth of the cup, her eyes flicking toward mine as I leaned against the doorway, became ordinary, comfortable. We still didn't speak in grand declarations. That wasn't us. Instead, we exchanged glances on the laundry, shared silence on the park bench near the corner store, hands brushing lightly when moving books or dishes. Sometimes she made a small joke about my stubborn way of stirring my tea, and I laughed quietly, because I knew she was watching, noticing, caring in the small, precise ways that counted. Her child sometimes lingered nearby when we sat outside, talking quietly about the world. I didn't feel intruding. She made space for me, as if I had always belonged, even when I had been unsure I should. One morning, I spilled my coffee, while reaching for a book she had left on the counter. I cursed softly under my breath. She glanced at me, expression calm, hands moving to help, and for a brief second, her fingers brushed mine. Nothing dramatic, just a touch. A reminder of everything that had almost happened and didn't need to, because here now, we were present. We walked together to the park one afternoon, the bench our quiet tradition. She didn't say much. I didn't either. But the air between us was lighter, carrying the comfort of small certainties. The world moved on around us, unremarkable, and we fit neatly into the pauses. I realized I didn't need fireworks or big gestures. I didn't need to cross lines that had been drawn, because the closeness we had, earned slowly, painfully, carefully, was enough. The warmth of her presence, the soft glance, the unspoken acknowledgement, that was everything. Later, as I leaned back on the bench, she resting her head lightly on my shoulder, I noticed the faint crease of her wrist, the way she pressed her fingers against mine without asking. A tiny gesture, ordinary, intimate. Only we understood it. I smiled quietly to myself, sipping the black coffee she had brought me. Life wasn't perfect, it wasn't dramatic, but it was ours, grounded, warm, real, and I thought softly, almost to no one, this is what I was waiting for all along.